Welcome to winGr Weekly, everybody. I guess this is number 5. It's a lovely Friday, and today we'll be covering the basics, simply because I actually kind of felt like there was no one actually covering the subject. So I'm gonna go down the normal checklist of what we're going through, but first I want to address, like, a lot of people have been commenting like, oh, you should edit your videos more. I want them to be like me sitting down talking to you guys, just like if you would to join me on Skype. So I'm gonna be saying weird stuff, my English might be stuttered, and but like, that's the way it is, that's the way I want it, and that's the way I like it. So going down checklist, we're gonna be covering basically the very basics of what your role in a team is, how to hold down spots, and we'll be covering the basics of rotation and team play, so you know when you're screwing up and how you should stop doing so. Because a lot of people don't actually understand the basics of the economics in this game, we'll be covering that as well. And possibly later we'll be covering nothing at all, because that's the end of the checklist. So let's just jump in game, and I'll show you how to hold down a spot. Just fading this music out. So let's let me restart the game. I need some weapons. And we'll be covering basically how you should hold down your spot. We're gonna use quad as an example. You might have another name for it, I don't know. But it's this area right here. That's the area we'll be covering. Simply because it functions very decently for all the aspects we'll be covering. So a lot of people, they don't understand that your role in a team, now I'm not talking about public, I'm talking about matchmaking or scrims or even clan practices, might not understand the fact that you are supposed to hold down a portion of the map as a defender. We'll be covering picking maybe later on, as it's a part of the basics as well, and maybe also the essentials to rushing. We'll see how far we get along. But so your part is basically to make sure that the terrorists can't run through here, and one of the ways of doing so is, of course, to just block off this entire area, but then again you're in a lot of hazards, so trying to be somewhat defensive and use your flashes wisely, and just keep this area free of terrorists if they're, and again, information like we went through in our first winGr Weekly, you gotta let your teammates know, and that also applies, say, if you are going in boiler and up to the crack house. You gotta let your teammates know that I no longer have control of this position, because your mate at Arch may be playing super defensively. He might even be in the link watching this angle, so he might not even be aware, and your teammate in apps might get surprised if suddenly there's a terrorist running up here. So let your teammates know when and if you're leaving it. And there's a certain synergy between Quad and Arch, except for the fact, like, expanding beyond the fact that they are both holding mid. But Arch is slightly more important in the grander scheme of things. So when Arch says he has to leave, then the guy holding Quad should automatically rotate around and hold Arch. And this is like, it shouldn't really be necessary to tell people to rotate, because you should already know how important it is, and how you sort of say that he is rotating to B, then everyone at A should shift one position closer to B automatically. If the guy at B rotates to A, then the last guy remaining at B should be playing more defensively, so that he can alert his team in time, and all those things. So you need to play defensively. You need to you can't sell yourself cheap when you are holding, and you need to let your teammates know, and all of that. And another important thing is knowing when to rotate, because say your caller is in in a confrontation with X amounts of terrorists, and he will be overwhelmed by the sheer numbers, and he can't manually tell you and you to rotate. You gotta interpret the information you get and rotate on your own initiative. So saying, like, one good benchmark for the guy playing in Arch is like, if there's 2 or more in let's say there's 3 people spotted at B, or 2 people spotted B, and there's a lot of flashes as well coming, he might tentatively, for instance, rotate over here, just preparing. And if they call 3, he will rotate fully. So it's a semi-rotation. If you playing quad are told that there are 3, you will only rotate to Arch. If you are told that there are 3 but the bomb has been spotted, you won't fully rotate, because then you leave A vulnerable in case of a fake or they decide to rotate to A. But what you might consider doing is, you know that there's a maximum of 2 people in the rest of the map, so you might start to work down the middle, trying to get in a position where you can see it early. You might even be deciding to, okay, I know they're at banana, I can peek this position so that I can give the rest of my team information very early if they are rotating. Same goes for mid. If you see 3 people at, or you hear 3 people at A, that meaning long and short combined, you know that catwalk, the guy in mid is going to rotate, so you might rotate down to mid and just keep watch on T-spawn, or upper mid, just keep watching mid to let your teammates know that they are going to rotate. And this is like, you gotta see that a guy rotating from mid to A on Dust 2, for instance, you gotta see that that creates a gap, and it's your natural job to fill that gap. Of course, if you're alone at B, then you might rotate outside of doors at B and just sit there and listen at B and listen out mid, so that you in both ways sort of cover both sides, even though it's really not all that possible. But you gotta listen if in case they are sneaking into site and trying to plant on B. You gotta let your team know. Alright, that covers that. Basics of economics. Well, first we gotta go through the terminology, because one thing is knowing what to do, another thing is if somebody calls in a scrim or in matchmaking a certain thing, then you gotta know what it means. So basically, say one of your team has I don't know 5k, and the rest of the team has 1600. Then one of you calls for an eco. An eco round is basically a round where you build economics. You build your economy. So what you do that round is, depending on how much money you have, of course, you buy either very little or nothing at all. So say you have just under 3,000, you might buy a HE grenade or a P250. But if you have under 2,000, don't buy anything at all, so that you can, so that you as a team can buy full weapons the next round. A forced buy is if you don't really have enough money to buy a full set of nades along with your weapon, and the caller says just force. That means that if there are 4 people on your team that have enough money to buy a full setup and you don't, then you might be called to force. Or if your caller feels that this round is very important, we need to win this round to mess up the economic of the opposing team, he might call for a force buy, basically meaning that you either buy a FAMAS and a Kevlar, or just an M4 and Kevlar. That is actually sort of up to you. You can do a FAMAS and Kevlar with grenades if you feel that you cannot hold your spot without grenades, or you can do a M4 and Kevlar if you feel comfortable with that. And I'm also be covering the first 3 rounds, basically the first 3 rounds including gun round, the round after gun round, and the third round as well. So we're first gonna look at the winning perspective. Let's say you won gun round, and there's a new round. And a lot of people do insane mistakes here. You don't want to buy an AK or an M4 at this stage, basically because you won't get a full set of nades, so you might get surprised in a rush, or they might actually be able to win due to that rush. And if you are taken out alone, and one from the opposing team manages to get an AK or an M4 from you, they alone can decimate your team. So what you want to do is you want to get preferably an MP9, the B32. That reason being that it's very, very effective against people without armor, and it's fairly cheap, so you won't spend all your money, and you can use it for those 2 rounds. So if you survive all rounds, you will have around 6k to spend on a full setup. And the MP5 is, or I'm sorry, it used to be called MP5. The MP9 or MP7, I don't really recall. Doesn't matter. B32 is very effective against people against armor, and you can kill them very quickly, and you can kill a lot of people very quickly. This is a perfect weapon against rushes, and it's a perfect weapon against people without armor. And it's not powerful enough that it will kill your teammates because your team has armor. So if they pick up one, you will still have the advantage in a 1v1. As with an AK, it's lethal with a headshot no matter what, as the MP something is not. And so you want to keep buying the anti-eco guns, as they are called, those rounds. And I would say we're losing. Basically, you don't want to buy anything. I see a lot of people buying too early. I see a lot of people like buying an AK, or just buying a deagle and a Kevlar and full nades the first round after losing. That basically sets your whole team 1 round back. So every time you make a mistake with the economics, you cost your team 2 rounds, because you cost your team that round, and you cost your team the following round, because either you have to force or you have to do a full eco when the rest of the team doesn't really need it. And you can screw up the economics so forth in the next rounds as well. So the first 2 rounds after losing a gun round, you want to save up so that you can afford weapon and full nades. Also, there is one small deviation. If you get a bomb plant in the first round or the second round, you can buy a 3rd round instead of 4th round. That's the one exception. If you're terrorist and you get a bomb plant the first round or the second round, you can buy the 3rd round. And also the CTs need to be aware of that, because if they know that they got a plant down, they got to be prepared with M4s 2nd round. Now, as a terrorist, you will not be stockpiled on nades. You might have a HE grenade and a flash, but you won't have the smoke, or you will have a smoke and a flash, but you won't have the HE. So the counter-terrorists might have an advantage, knowing that they got the plant down. The first round, for instance, might be an incentive to your team to pull off buying an M4, buying M4s, even though it's a risk. Like, if you get killed, you will not be able to buy an M4 next round, and you will have to face AKs with an eco gun. So it's sort of a trade-off, but you as a team need to decide what to do when they get the plant. So when do I call an eco for my team? Well, basically it's very simple. If your entire team, and I mean every single one, can afford either a forced buy or a full setup buy, for terrorists that is 4,500, I'm sorry, 3,500. And for terrorists, counter-terrorists, that is no, that's a force by 3,500. And for counters, that is 3,950. And you add 1,000 on top of that for full nade setup. So 4,900 for counter-terrorists and 4,500 for terrorists. So if anybody on your team has less than that, you should call an eco, unless you want to force buy, which is a decision made by a caller depending on the state of your match. I do kind of feel like I want to go over picking and what you should do as a terrorist, and more importantly the very basics of rushing, because it's very quickly done. Say your caller is calling for, you know what, let's use banana. It's a perfect example. Say your caller is calling a rush for banana. Never mind the flashes and smokes and whatnot, because you might not even use that, but he's calling for a rush down banana, on banana as a T. And this is what I see a lot of people do wrong. They get maybe here, and then they get flashed, and then they might, oh man, I'm flashed, and they go hide. Depending on their ability to navigate while flashed, they might try to run back here, and they wait here until the flash comes out. Basically meaning that you have two people who didn't get flashed, or did the right thing, and they have run over here, whilst your three other players are over here. Basically these two guys will get slaughtered. What you are supposed to do, and this applies to every single rush for every bomb site ever in Counter-Strike. This is how you should do it. No matter what, you are not to stop, no matter what. Ever. If you get flashed, if you get an incendiary under your feet, if you get naded, if you run through smoke, whatever, unless the caller has said something otherwise, you will keep running to that site. And there's a very, very good reason for it. The first reason is, of course, that your team is being split up. The other reason being that if people come one by one after the flash is thrown out, it's super easy to take them out from spools and main. And it's a lot more difficult to get a team that just explodes onto site. And say you are playing from U-Box or Fountain, and you might be able to do one or two, but the first couple of seconds these guys will usually get at least as flash as you will. If that, or you'll be fast and get the element of surprise. So you just want to explode into spot and give them the entire field of view that they have to kill, instead of just, I can just put my aim here and just tap every single one, theoretically. So you want to fill their field of view and spread out, fan out as much as possible when you get into sight. And that will automatically happen if every single one of your team is flashed, believe me. I've seen rounds where my entire team was flashed, like incredibly flashed, and we got out of the flash, and one guy was here, one guy was over here, one guy got stuck over here, and one guy managed to run all the way to truck, and we had one guy staying behind. But we managed to split up across the entire site, and the opposing team was just as flashy as we were. So we naturally got the plant down, because then was a 5v2 where no one knew where the other one was. Meaning that we lost, I think we lost one guy, and then we got the plant down. And that's how you should do it, even in B, on Dust 2. If you rush B and you get flashed in tunnels, there's so many people who just run back or block everybody, and the rush just goes down the drain. What you want to do is you want to rush out, you want to fan out, you want to try to get to plateau as fast as possible, because if everybody just fans out, then they cannot 5-man spray you. It's not humanly possible. So that's rushing. Picking, because it's just a terminology thing, and I want to just cover it really briefly. We might go more in depth later on. But your role, let's say your caller is calling, just try to get some picks. Now this is as far from pushing or rushing as you'll ever see. Basically, picking is just slowly working your way up the map and try to get either a kill or just try to get in a really good position. Especially on Inferno, you wanna gain as much ground as possible. So if you have control over main, that's great. If you don't feel any threat from main, you can possibly go spools. I would never go any more aggressive than this. This is like the furthest I would go while picking, without anything being called. Maybe not even more than this, but at least now you have control. Now you have car instead of being in wound stacks or in pits. So you don't wanna rush into side. You don't wanna expose yourself too much. But say they are super aggressive in mid with their peeking, right? You want to go alt mid, and then you wanna peek once, and if they peek, you might want to smoke them out and throw a flash over so that they retreat, and then you can take charge of this area. And that way you give your caller a lot more options. You might not even be able to get a kill, but you get map control, as we like to call it. I might even do a whole episode on map control, because it's such a broad topic and it's so important. But you shouldn't have to worry about that yet. Right now you just have to know that you want to get in a better position, and same goes for mid. Without something being called, I wouldn't push further than this. I would just use this position, and if they aren't peeking, I would let my caller know, and we might, as a team, decide to just slowly walk up, having full control, standing like this, and maybe execute something from here instead of from mid, which is much more explosive, comes much more as a surprise. So that's your job as when you're picking. You just want to slowly try to get more ground, get kills. You might get killed, certainly. Just don't take any huge risks. Don't rush like a buffoon anywhere. And I guess that's that. If you made it to the end, let me know in the comments. If you want to stay updated on my thingies, you gotta subscribe. There's a link to Twitter and whatnot, but if you just subscribe, you'll get all the new winGr weeklies, where I will give you more tips later on. For this week, this is Big winGr signing off.